Welcome to your astrological forecast for the week of Monday, July 31st through Sunday, August 6th, 2023. This week, by far, the main highlight is, of course, the full moon. This will happen on Tuesday at 9 degrees Aquarius. And I think most of us are familiar with what a full moon generally means. This is when the moon opposes the sun. It, of course, appears full in the sky. And what this means for us is it's a time of increased activity, increased volatility. There may be more of a chance of major life changes happening at this time, or at the very least, again, just increased activity in general. So everyone always asks me, is this good or bad? And it's, really with the full moon, it's kind of all over the place. There's more good things happening. There's more, bad things happening as we see it. It tends to be dramatic. It tends to be volatile, and often it has to do with culmination. So you may be reaching a turning point or completion in something that may have started either 2 weeks ago, or it may have started longer than that ago. But this can be a time of turning points and completions as well. Because this full moon is happening in Aquarius, I would say this is especially eventful, especially dramatic for this time. This means that moon is in an air sign, which has everything to do with, being spontaneous and sudden change, things along those lines. And moon is, of course, opposing sun, which is in Leo, which is, very fiery, very volatile, very active. So with these full moons, when you have, like this one where the moon is in an air sign and sun is in a fire sign, I do tend to notice that things are more volatile, more reactive, more active in general. There may be more things going on compared to, if the sun and moon were in earth and water signs. It's yin and yang. This is a yang dynamic. So basically, any full moon would already be dramatic and eventful, but this one, especially because of where it's at, definitely expect the unexpected. Expect sudden shifts in perception, epiphanies, breakthroughs, sudden changes in like mass psychological behavior, the way groups act and interact. These things could be changing, breakthroughs with technology, other things. We're going to talk more about that in the day by day forecast. The other thing, which may not be as exciting to talk about, but it's definitely very important and I think maybe overlooked by many, is Mercury is entering the pre-shadow this week. So, in other words, basically, Mercury will turn retrograde. I hate to say it, but Mercury will turn retrograde in the near future. So, and I'll give you some dates. So, Mercury it enters pre-shadow August 3rd, and I'll briefly explain what that means. And it will turn retrograde August 23rd. So, really, for most of the month, for about 3 weeks, Mercury is first going to be in that pre-shadow spot. And definitely don't panic. It's definitely distinct and different from Mercury retrograde. Basically, what this means is Mercury has entered the area that it will soon travel retrograde over from our perception, of course. So, in other words, Mercury having to do with, of course, information, daily habits, and rhythms to things, how busy we are, but then also, the information, the communication, learning, it's the mental energy. Everything represented by Mercury is it's traveling very fast right now because Mercury is traveling very fast. It always does this at this time when it's entering the pre-shadow, traveling very fast compared to how it normally does. So this means there may be a lot of information hitting you this week. This is exacerbated by the full moon in Aquarius as well. There's just so much going on, so much new information. I know many of you may be aware of the UFO congressional hearings, and we may have different opinions on that or whatever. But that's just one example of new information coming to us this week. So there may be new information in the news, in the headlines, like that example, but in our personal lives as well, though, there's just so much going on. It can definitely be overwhelming. It can also be useful for learning new things and evolving at an accelerated rate. But on the other hand, we can become overwhelmed. We can become, it can become unmanageable. What I find is during Mercury pre-shadow, things tend to travel so fast. Everything's happening so fast. We're in uncharted territory that we tend to not really be fully integrating everything in the moment. So, and of course, again, this applies as above, so below. This applies to us as a whole, as a society, but also individually in our own personal lives as well. I would speculate that each of us, myself included, and maybe yourself, going forward after August 3rd during Mercury pre-shadow, I would speculate that there's probably something going on in our lives that we may not be aware of, or we may not fully understand or appreciate. It's not integrated. And this is not a criticism. It's totally okay. We don't necessarily have to be, fully understanding and fully integrating everything in real time. That's what the Mercury retrograde is for. That will happen later. But basically, right now, all you need to know is there's just a lot going on. It's coming at us from all directions. It's very exciting, very invigorating, but it can also be overwhelming. Just accept it. That's kind of my advice for this, and honestly, probably for most things astrologically. You got to kind of just roll with the punches during Mercury pre-shadow and during a full moon for that matter. There can be just so much drama, so much intensity. You're going to need time to process it. You may not fully understand everything right away. You may not have processed things mentally or emotionally right away, and that's totally okay. Take your time. Just know that, these times will be unpredictable. Expect the unexpected, and honestly just go with it. Like I touched on, we will have Mercury retrograde starting later this month. Yes, I know that is definitely not everyone's favorite. It can be very dysfunctional, but on the other hand, it can sometimes give us an opportunity to slow down and gain that greater integration, that greater understanding that we sometimes so very much need. Okay, so definitely a very interesting week, lots going on, and I think it's already been very interesting at the time of my filming this, but this will definitely continue to get even weirder and more interesting as we get into the week here. Okay, so let's get into the day by day forecast here. Okay, so we start out Monday, July 31st with Moon transiting through Capricorn. And to me, this is kind of interesting considering that at this point in the lunar cycle, the Moon is mostly full. It appears mostly lit up. Definitely not full yet for sure. It's not yet in Aquarius, but it's definitely getting there. It's getting fuller each day, each night. At this point, it's mostly full. And to me, this looks sort of like the calm before the storm, I guess you could say. Moon is in Capricorn, which is, of course, indicating that we may feel a little bit unsettled, but we're valuing productivity, goal setting, planning. We want to be organized. And Moon in Capricorn, this is, traditionally, it's a more feminine, more introverted, more kind of internal energy. It's not quite as rowdy yet. Things are beginning to gradually heat up as the moon gains light and as we get closer to that full moon. But again, right now it's a little bit more introverted. There's more of an Earth focus in the chart. Jupiter, Uranus, and Taurus, Mars, Mercury in Virgo, and then Moon and Pluto, for that matter, in Capricorn. So more of an Earth focus. Um, again, on the one hand, things are gradually heating up and kind of building up, but then on the other hand, for the moment, things are still focused on this very heavy earth element. So we're still, as a whole, experiencing things, valuing productivity, practicality. Earth signs tend to make things a bit slower, a bit more steady. So again, it's the calm before the storm. This definitely won't last. Speaking of all these Earth planets, I did notice that there is a loose Earth grand trine today. And I don't know how aware you guys are. A grand Earth trine is basically just when you have 3 points equidistant from one another in the chart. So, in other words, for this one, this is mostly triggered by the moon. So, like here, for example, you can see noon Eastern Standard Time on Monday, July 31st. With moon at 22 degrees Capricorn, right at noon, it makes an exact trine to Uranus at 22 degrees Taurus. And then there's a very, very loose, grand trine that the two of those make with Mars and Mercury, mostly Mars in Virgo. So, in other words, Mars at 13 degrees Virgo, very loose grand trine with Moon and Uranus. I wouldn't usually even mention this. The moon is really the one kind of setting this dynamic off, and it travels so fast. This really won't last very long. But basically, what happens when you have a grand trine like that is it's very harmonious. Think of the nature of a trine, but kind of multiplied or squared. Trines are harmonious aspects. They're very strong. They're stable. They're easy. Here with a grand trine, things may be very easy, very strong, and this is an Earth grand trine, so it's in the context of being productive as a whole. Of course, I always say we will each experience this differently. If you have a lot of earth in your chart, you're going to feel right at home. This is going to be very natural for you. These energies are more or less agreeing with what you already are. So that's going to be super easy. This is your time to shine. It's going to be really great for you. But, for others that may not have as much earth in their charts, it may be more difficult, a little bit more foreign. So of course there are those differences, but as a whole, generally speaking, this grand Earth trine is showing a lot of harmony, a lot of progress, a lot of success when it comes to being productive, being very practical. Like, let's get organized, let's be realistic. We may be very, very clear, very practical right now with these Earth energies. And then of course, again, there's this like work ethic that's associated with all three of the Earth signs. So yeah, that can all be really great for getting work done. Definitely a really nice dynamic for having, on a Monday like this as well. And of course, we can't forget, there is a lot of there is this whole Earth dynamic. There's this Earth grand trine, lots of Earth planets. I would say that's the main focus, but don't forget, Sun is of course still in Leo. Venus is in Leo as well. So we still have much of these, sunshiny, warm, proud, outgoing Leo midsummer energies for us in the northern hemisphere. We are in Leo season. There is definitely that focus for sure, but it's being combined with this Earth focus for Monday. So put it all together. It's a really great day for getting a lot of work done, being productive, or just being active in general. Really, basically, it's a good day for being productive, being active in some kind of way, especially if you want to get something done before the relative chaos that will unfold with the full moon. Okay. Okay, and then that ends the month, and then we start out Tuesday, August 1st. Happy August, everyone. But we start out August with the full moon. Full moon will actually happen on today on the 1st, and again, it happens at 9 degrees Aquarius. So let's start there. So you can see here, noon Eastern Standard Time. Moon is only 2 degrees away from that exact opposition it will make with the sun, and that's where it is, of course, technically, that's where the full moon is exact. It's where it's at its peak. But this, of course, is something that we will experience all day Tuesday. And I would speculate that this will really carry over into Wednesday as well, because the moon will still be in Aquarius on Wednesday. It will still be very loosely opposing the sun and still opposing Venus. Um, so long story short, this is going to be something that we're experiencing definitely all day Tuesday, definitely into Wednesday as well. But yes, okay. So for the Aquarius full moon, again, whatever I look at, I like to look at not just the full moon, not just the moon itself, but the nature, the relationship the moon has with the sun. Because full moons to me are not just about the full moon. It's a sun moon opposition. It's about the sun almost as much as it's about the moon. Okay, so look at them both. Look at the whole dynamic here. Moon in Aquarius, 9 degrees. Sun in Leo at 9 degrees. Much of the themes of this full moon have to do with that opposition between the sun and the moon, the nature of that whole axis, the Leo Aquarius axis. Okay. And in its most basic form, what can we say about this axis? It's a fire air axis, so it's going to be a more active phase. If we had, like I said in the intro, if we had a full moon in an earth or water sign, these are more reserved, they have more foresight, they're more into planning, they're less active, less spontaneous. Those types of full moons would still be active, but relatively less so than something like this. Okay, I think that's the first thing that we can see right off the bat. Aquarius full moon, opposing Sun and Leo. These are dramatic, theatrical signs. Both Leo and Aquarius love a good party. They both represent culmination, and both Leo and Aquarius can be very rebellious in their own way. They have to do with our individuality and how it relates to the group. So a lot of those themes may come into play here. Who am I as a person? How can I be authentic with my own, living my truth, representing myself authentically, but also honoring the group as well, or maybe not honoring the group. It depends. There's that choice I think that we have during Aquarius transits. To me, air signs are dualistic. They have kind of two sides to them. Of course, we can see that with Gemini, but I would say that with Libra and Aquarius as well. So for Aquarius, for example, Aquarius is often represented as the rebel, it's the outcast. Modern astrology has really taken Aquarius and gone in that direction. And, I do think it's a bit overblown, but yes, that there is a lot of truth to that. On the other hand, though, Aquarius also has to do with conformity as well. Uniformity, conforming to your culture, conforming to valuing the needs and valuing the group over autonomy. Honoring the group's needs over yourself at times. So there's this whole spectrum, and there's this whole like dualistic side to Aquarius. And so, on the one hand, with a full moon here, yes, there could be a lot of rebellion. You may reach a certain point there yourself, especially if you have major placements on or around 9 degrees of Aquarius more than any other sign, but also Leo or Taurus or Scorpio as well. So again, it's around 9 degrees. Um, I was gonna say halfway. I guess that's a little bit before halfway through those signs, but for any of us, this is going to be a very active day. Lots going on, lots of changes there. But especially if you have placements around 9 degrees of the fixed signs, Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, this will be life changing for you. And again, specifically, Aquarius has to do with breakthroughs. That's what triggers these unpredictable changes and potentially the rebellion that these things are also associated with Aquarius. But it all comes from the shift in perception. Okay. Um, Aquarius is associated with Uranus. These things have to do with sudden breakthroughs. And these things come from nowhere. So, for example, you may just suddenly realize something. You may just wake up and just view part of your life a completely different way. Maybe you're coming across some information that completely changes your view on something, your worldview, your understanding. Or maybe it's just nothing in particular. Like you just have changed, and it's hard to say why. Okay, these are the types of things that happen with Aquarius energies. Full moon in Aquarius, definitely no exception. Full moons, of course, already have to do with sudden changes and turning points, and things can change very dramatically. There could be a lot of drama, life changes with the full moon. So again, because Aquarius has to do with shifts in perception and thinking, expect the unexpected. You know, really great time for looking for informational downloads, psychic, becoming having psychic experiences, suddenly becoming aware of something, or again, it could be as mundane as just shifting your opinion, shifting your perception on something. The challenging part comes from after that. You're basically given a choice. If your perception suddenly changes, what do you do with that information? Okay, and obviously it's going to depend on the circumstance, and it's up to your own free will. That's what's challenging about it. There's this new, we all want increased consciousness. Let's expand our consciousness. Especially in the metaphysical community, we all want these things. These things are glorified, and they rightly should be. That's the goal here. But there's huge responsibility and sometimes discomfort with these things as well. It can make you feel crazy. And again, just getting back to my point, the challenging part comes from, it can be exciting to have a revelation, to come across new information, to view something in a more deep or profound way than you did before. The challenging part is, what do you do with that information? Now it's up to you. There's probably going to be a change that you may want to make, or do you just sit on this new realization and you don't change your life? The other challenging thing is that your standards may change. Part of your life that was satisfactory to you before, now may not be. Now you're venturing out, you're wanting something more, wanting something deeper, wanting something different. Okay, so that's where the challenging part comes in. It's up to you, it's up to free will. It's your choice, what you do with this potential greater awareness, shifts in consciousness, etc., etc. So that's one potential challenge with a full moon in Aquarius. Of course, again, that depends, how you're going to experience that depends on the nature of your charts. But I would say honestly, like, the thing you can expect the most going into this is it's a time of increased activity, drama. That's it in its simplest form. Okay, I think this is something that the public is generally aware about. Even those that aren't into astrology know about this because it's so tangible. It's very tangible. This is one of the most tangible things you can really look at in astrology, because anyone who's worked customer service or worked at a hospital, worked at an airport, they can tell you, like, shit really does hit the fan during a full moon. So that's basically what you can expect. I would say this is a relatively more volatile full moon than most. Not super dramatically so. This isn't an eclipse and it doesn't have super crazy aspects, but it would be more active, more volatile than perhaps the typical full moon. Speaking of aspects, though, there is one aspect that the full moon makes that I want to briefly talk about before moving on here. Okay, full moon at 9 degrees Aquarius. It does, the only aspect I can really see is it does make a T square with Jupiter at 13 degrees Taurus, okay? And this is somewhat close to exact, it's about 4 degrees off. But basically, we already had an opposition with the sun and the moon, okay? So we kind of discussed that already. That's what makes things so dramatic. There's this push and pull. You may be pushed, different ways. There's a crossroads. There's these two opposite energies that are making this connection, but they are opposing. They're at odds. They're conflicted. Okay, so we kind of covered that. That was the whole setup for, that's what the full moon in Aquarius is, opposing Sun and Leo. Now, though, you also have to take into account it's not just those that are opposing. Jupiter is squaring both of those. Jupiter is squaring, not exactly, of course, but it's loosely squaring the sun and the moon at the same time as they oppose each other. So it literally looks like a T. That's why it's a T square. That's why it's called a T square. So now you have another energy that's at odds. Jupiter making these squares. Squares are contentious aspects. Speaking of squares and contentions and Jupiter, Mars actually also squares Jupiter today. Wait, that can't be right. I'm sorry, Mars trines Jupiter, so that's different. We're going to talk about that in a second. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself, but yes, okay. So Jupiter forming these squares with Sun and Moon. This is very contentious. This adds more intensity, more volatility to an aspect that was already fundamentally volatile. And on the one hand, again, everyone asks me, is this good or bad? On the one hand, we may experience these things as bad in the sense that, these represent change. Change can be uncomfortable, things, there may be disruption. There could be more stress or anxiety, sudden changes, changes can lead to disappointment, whatever the situation is. That's something that is correlated by the full moon and as well as the square aspects in general, the T square. Um, on the other hand, though, it's, I guess fundamentally it's about change. Change can be, we may not embrace change, but on the other hand, um, change can be good as well, and adding a T square on top of this full moon, that increases the change that much more. Yes, it is contentious. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's provoking us to take action. It's pushing change, pushing evolution. Specifically here, keep in mind this is of course Jupiter. Jupiter expands everything. Jupiter is benefic. It's bright and shiny. It tends to make life a little bit easier. It tends to bring abundance. What else? It tends to bring expansion, which is usually good. The main caveat though with Jupiter is that expansion is not always a good thing. You can have too much of a good thing, basically. And sometimes, depending on what Jupiter is involved in, it can expand something that we may not want expanded. Here, involving Jupiter into the full moon, you just have, factor after factor, which makes this full moon even more, volatile, significant. Jupiter is basically just expanding this whole dynamic, making it that much more dramatic, that much more expansive. So on the one hand, going back to this chance at having epiphanies and breakthroughs, Jupiter squaring the moon and the sun, for that matter, during this will increase that even more so because Jupiter does have to do with not just expansion but higher learning, expansion of the soul, expansion of the mind. Okay, so add that on to an already unpredictable Aquarius full moon. You get the chance for lots of adventure, lots of drama, lots of epiphany breakthroughs, psychic breakthroughs, breakthroughs in consciousness, learning something new. Uh, Whatever you learn that's new, it's probably not going to be some little tidbit. This isn't about factoids. This is about learning real information, information that changes your worldview. Again, I want to go back to the UFO hearings. I know that happened, over a week, much before the actual full moon, but it's still close enough that I think it's relevant. And that's a good example of, this is life changing stuff, or it's at least changing of how you see the world, how we understand the world. Okay. Other than that, there could be also just changes in how you view your life. This is deep stuff, deep information, philosophy, deep consciousness. These are the areas we can expect major change with this full moon, even more so because of the T square with Jupiter. And then again, the most mundane part of that T square is it just adds to the intensity, it adds to the chaos. Um, it does bring about this kind of nice light to it. Like I said, Jupiter is benefic, it is generally positive. So I do think that does sweeten this deal a little bit. We may learn something that's very positive. We may be able to make a really positive life change or learn something that's uplifting in nature. But again, on the other hand, this could also just be generally unpredictable, chaotic, lots of change, lots of sudden sudden changes. Expect the unexpected. That's all I'll say about that. Okay, two aspects we need to talk about for Tuesday, real briefly, because the main thing you will experience is, of course, the full moon and that T square I mentioned. That's the big thing. That's going to be, that's what everyone's here probably listening to this for. That's going to be the main event. That's what you're going to experience all day. It's going to be a crazy day. The only thing that would surprise me is if it was a boring day. Okay, that's the one thing that would really catch me off guard on a day like that, astrologically speaking. Okay, so that's the main thing. That's by far the most tangible thing. However, there are these two other relatively minor aspects. Mercury does oppose Saturn today. So Mercury's at 5 degrees Virgo. It opposes Saturn at 5 degrees Pisces. Saturn, of course, has to do with like the structure of our lives, usually having to do with our relationship with our money, time, our resources, money, time, energy. Our it has to do with constriction, and it has a lot to do with society as well, like laws, rules, regulations. Mercury opposing Saturn. This means that all those things, the structure of our lives is in conflict. It's opposing the mental energy. So, in other words, we may be mentally desiring things that are not sustainable, not resourceful, or we may be conflicted. How do I, maybe it could be about learning or information too. You want to learn, you want information, but then the information is there's something blocking it, there's something delaying it. And again, this is the same day as the full moon. So on the one hand, there's tons of breakthroughs and stuff happening, but on the other hand, some of the information may be kept behind a barrier or there's some kind of conflict, delay, challenge there. Part of this could be about the increased responsibility that comes with knowledge, which I already kind of discussed a bit. But there's this kind of heaviness that enters our public, common psyche, represented by Mercury opposing Saturn. On the one hand, this could be favorable because we may be more aware of our limitations. Maybe we can be more wise, more practical. We may be more aware of the long term ramifications of certain choices that we're making. So that can always be good. This can allow us to have really great planning or goal setting, things like that. Set ourselves up for the future, basically. On the other hand, though, again, this could block information. This could delay information. Even just like, let's say you have certain plans for the day, certain errands you need to run, there could be delays or blockages with those. So, and then again, plus the full moon is happening at the same time. So I would definitely say, like, if you can afford to keep your plans loose today on Tuesday, I would definitely do that. I wouldn't say, stay at home and don't do anything. This is an active time. It can be fun. It can definitely be chaotic and it can be too much, but it can be fun as well. In some ways, this is party energy. Okay. So, have fun or be productive, do whatever you need to do. But again, expect the unexpected. If you can leave your plans to be a little bit loose, especially considering this opposition between Saturn and Mercury. Saturn delays and challenges things, and Mercury, among other things, can have to do with not only information and communication, but also our errands, short distance travel, things like that. So I would just say be careful with those types of things. This is not the type of day I would want a ton of errands, to do. Okay. Especially with like strict plans where you have to do things back to back to back and you can't be late, that's just not going to work on a day like today. Okay. Give yourself extra time to do what you need to do and expect the unexpected. Okay. Last aspect we'll talk about for Tuesday, Mars does trine Jupiter. So we are already talking about how Jupiter is, involved in this full moon and is making things potentially sweeter and more abundant, but also more expansive, more chaotic, more dramatic. So on the same day, Mars is making this trine. So Mars Jupiter trines, especially, are I would say generally favorable. Of course, you have Jupiter. We talked about that. Jupiter is expansive. Right now, Jupiter's in Taurus, so it's showing expansion with our resources, how we manage our resources. I know that might sound contradictory since there's such a mess with our economy and things like that right now. That has more to do with Uranus. That's kind of a different issue. I don't want to get sidetracked here, but Jupiter does have to do with some kind of expansion with resources and how we support ourselves, represented by Taurus. This trine is showing this harmonious communication, this harmonious connection between that energy and Mars. Mars, of course, has more to do with our ambitions, our drive. Mars right now is in Virgo, so we're more, we may be more successful or more oriented toward, achieving small projects today. We're more attentive to the details. Let's attack these little problems with Mars and Virgo. And this tends to be a pretty favorable approach. Okay, so basically, this trine is showing these energies that are kind of bleeding into each other. That's how you could describe an aspect. So this connection means you could look at it as Jupiter's energies being channeled into Mars. So in other words, there's something expansive going on with our drive, with our ambitions. And again, what's ironic or almost backward about it is it may be oriented toward mundane things. So the more you have this approach of, like, let's say you have a really big goal, break it down into small tasks. What can I do right now for this big goal, for this big, thing I want to achieve in the future? How can I do that now? What does that look like every day? What are the little things I can do to set myself up for that kind of success? This approach would be favored by Mars and Virgo anyway, but especially with Jupiter trining Mars, there may be huge breakthroughs, huge success, huge abundance with that type of energy in general. Also, on a more generic or kind of vague outlook, or a more vague way of looking at this would be to say that Mars trine Jupiter rather. Mars is the drive, it's our ambition, and Jupiter expands things. So it's expanding our drive, expanding our ambitions. We may be a little bit more cocky, a little bit more spontaneous. And again, this is during the full moon still, so that's already kind of blowing things up. But then we also have Jupiter trine Mars, being optimistic, wanting to start a new project. Let's get productive. Let's do something. Let's get something big done. Okay. Um, but again, definitely the major focus is the full moon today for sure. Lots going on Tuesday. I promise that my analyses will not be as long for the other days of the week. I know this. I don't want this to be too rambly, but hopefully I can kind of breeze through these other days here. Okay, Wednesday, August 2nd. So as I mentioned before, Moon is still going to be in Aquarius all day today. Um, yes, and so what's interesting is we don't technically have any planetary major aspects on Wednesday. Just because there are no exact aspects, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not much going on today, though. And I'm not saying that to try to sell it to you. That's honestly the truth. First of all, I think the main thing is, as I mentioned, we're still experiencing this full moon. Technically, it was early on Tuesday Eastern Standard Time, when it comes to the exact aspect. But it definitely takes up all of Tuesday, basically all of Wednesday as well. It may not be as acute as it was on Tuesday for many of us, but we're still experiencing those same themes. We're still in this heightened phase of activity. There may be more stress, more anxiety, more sudden changes, epiphanies, breakthroughs. Everything I said for Tuesday, still relevant for Wednesday. You're not out of the woods yet. And I'm not, it's not necessarily just a bad thing. It could be chaotic, but it could also be fun. If you have, I don't know, if you have some kind of party in the middle of the week during this, the party's not over yet, I guess you could say. So yes, that's still going on. And what else was I gonna say? That's definitely the main thing. Other than that, the moon does make multiple aspects of its own as well. I don't always talk about aspects with the moon because they are so brief, but basically, moon will square Uranus today. You can actually see that exact square on this chart for noon Eastern Standard Time. Um, Moon at 22 degrees Aquarius, squaring Uranus at 22 degrees Taurus. Excuse me. I don't want to spend too much time on this. Um, it's just going to make things more unpredictable. Okay. So this is, again, it's continuing a lot of things that we've already been experiencing with that full moon one day prior. This is just an aspect continuing that theme of unpredictability, sudden changes in thought and perception, shifts in awareness, shifts in, you can get intuitive flashes, psychic awareness, realizing things. Again, it all sounds really great, greater consciousness, increased consciousness, but this can be unsettling. It can be disruptive. Okay. And I think that was the main one. Moon also opposes Venus today. I'm not going to talk a lot about that, and squares the nodes. So, I mean, in general, it's basically what I said. It's continuing these themes. It's still a trippy time. It's a very active time. Lots of drama, life changes. It's plot. The plot is thickening, I guess you could say. Maybe more so on Tuesday than Wednesday, but still Wednesday as well. Something interesting I forgot to mention about this week is that the way things happen to work out, the moon happens to change signs right around midnight every 2 days, basically this whole week. So I usually mention whenever the moon enters a new sign, and the way I do so just needs to be a little bit different for this week because of the moon changing so close to midnight. That means depending on your time zone, the exact days that the moon changes signs, maybe you may have to give or take a day depending on your time zone. But I do these things based on Eastern Standard Time. So basically, the night of Wednesday, August 2nd, that night, right around midnight, moon enters Pisces. Okay, so in other words, just for the sake of simplicity, I'm not going to explain all that every time the moon enters a new sign this week. I'm basically just going to say, at least for Eastern Standard Time, moon is in Aquarius all day Wednesday, and it will basically be in Pisces all day Thursday. And I did forget to mention moon left Capricorn and entered Aquarius around midnight the night of Monday night, the night of the 31st going into the 1st. Okay? So that's, I know that's just a technicality. I just want to get my facts straight. I don't want to be, misquoted as saying that the moon's changing in a sign where it's technically not in your area. At any rate, so moon in Pisces all day for Thursday, August 3rd. And so, of course, right there, that is something to talk about. There's a huge shift there. Moon is now in a different sign. We're entering a different part of the lunar cycle. It's a different, lunar phase. And also, the moon has entered, Pisces. It's a more introverted sign. Pisces can still be pretty wild, don't get me wrong. There's still definitely a high degree of unpredictability and other things like that with Pisces. But on the other hand, or at the same time, this is a bit of a more inward oriented energy, especially with Moon in Pisces. Things tend to get very dreamy, very receptive. It's kind of like a feminine, kind of a soft energy. Let's be open. Let's be soft with ourselves. Let's allow ourselves to see the nuance, see the subtleties. Have greater clarity and understanding, especially if it's coming from a more spiritual or emotional point of view. So not a super big deal, but that's definitely a major shift in the focus. And to me, it also the entering of the moon into Pisces also, in my mind, concludes the full moon aspect. It was mostly on Tuesday. It bled into Wednesday. Even by Thursday morning Eastern Standard Time, the full moon is definitely over. We may be still dealing with ramifications or things that have changed on the full moon. We may still be dealing with those changes, but now the themes are moving on. We're entering a new phase here. Okay, so Moon in Pisces should be a little bit more chill. Theoretically, I could be wrong, but I would expect it to be. The intensity has worn off dramatically by Thursday. At least that's what I would expect or forecast. One major thing I do want to mention for Thursday, though, so Mercury does enter the pre-shadow on Thursday, August 3rd at 8 degrees Virgo. Okay, and this is one of those things where this doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a huge change that you're going to experience. This doesn't necessarily mean that sometime on Thursday everything changes and is different. Once Mercury's in its pre-shadow, this is something that is more or less. I was going to say gradual, kind of a gradual change. Again, it basically just means that Mercury is entering the area that it will eventually retrograde back over. So this area that we are in, mentally speaking, a lot of these topics that are about to come up over the next few weeks, the learning, the information, the new things happening in our lives in general, A lot of these things are going to come up later. We're going to spend more time on these things later when Mercury's retrograde. Right now, everything's flying too fast at us. We can't possibly integrate everything. There is so much, as above, so below, collectively as well as individually. So much new information being thrown at us. I think this is intensified even further because Mercury is in Virgo where it's exalted and in domicile. So Mercury in Virgo represents that increased learning, that increased efficacy of learning. The information is very direct. So now when you add in the factor of Mercury being in pre-shadow, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of very heavy information. So again, we're not fully understanding everything. We're not fully integrating everything. We're not meant to. That's one of the silver linings of the Mercury retrograde phase that is to come. So I just don't want anyone to be freaked out about this. It's not. It's definitely not like a beginning of Mercury retrograde in any way, really. It's more just representing this super fast period. On the one hand, it can be confusing, overwhelming. There's just so much going on, but on the other hand, this can be good for really rapid learning. Again, though, I will say one more time, just keep in mind, we're going to go back over these things later. We're entering uncharted territory super fast right now. Later, we'll go back and you'll see, you'll get a greater understanding. You'll see things on a deeper level during and after the Mercury retrograde phase. Okay. All right. So just keep that in mind. That will, again, that will go on for the next 3 weeks. I'll give you those dates real quick again with this Mercury retrograde. So Mercury enters pre-shadow, of course, Thursday, August 3rd. We just said that. It turns retrograde August 23rd. Mercury turns direct September 15th of this year, of course. And then Mercury leaves the post shadow September 20th. So really, the greater part of 2 months is involved with the entire Mercury retrograde if you count the pre and post shadow periods as well. But again, I've read certain takes on the pre and post shadow where people say that it's just like a continuation, or it's like Mercury retrograde is already almost starting. That's really not what it is. I want to be very clear with that. The pre shadow is this super accelerated period. All right, Friday, August 4th. There are no exact planetary aspects that I am aware of. Moon continues through Pisces, so this does add some dynamism, I think. All the other, inner planets, inner bodies are in Leo and Virgo. Sun and Leo, still, of course, in Leo. Excuse me, Sun and Venus still in Leo, talking to you guys. Mercury and Mars in Virgo. So the focus is still on Leo and Virgo. The optimism, the outgoing energy of Leo, combined with the practicality and the attention to detail and learning of Virgo. So that's generally been the focus that has been ongoing. Now with Moon in Pisces, though, since yesterday, this adds a much different energy. We're also focused on again the big picture, spirituality, the nuance of things. Let's experience things. The subtlety of things. Let's be intuitive and aware of each other emotionally. This could be it's a very receptive energy for sure. So I think this is kind of a nice mix. We're bringing in a very different energy. Now we've got fire, earth, and water. One thing I did notice for Friday is and I actually had to look this up because it was new to me. I don't typically get into like complicated aspects that involve more than 3 or 4 points, or lesser known aspects like those. But I did find one for Friday. So basically, this one is loose as well, and it's triggered by the moon. So the moon, when it gets in these later degrees of Pisces, it will form what is called a small talent triangle, or it's also called a minor grand trine. And basically, what this is Moon and Neptune, for that matter, at the end of Pisces. It will form simultaneously. It will form two sextiles, one with Pluto in Capricorn, and then the other with Uranus in Taurus. And at the same time, Uranus in Taurus and Pluto in Capricorn are loosely trining one another. So in other words, this is one trine and two sextiles, if that makes sense. So hopefully you can picture that. I wish I could draw on there. And that's why they call it a minor grand trine, because it is It is a triangle. It's just, kind of a smaller triangle than like an actual grand trine. Okay. So what does that mean? Why am I bringing it up? So these are kind of funky aspects. They are interesting. Basically, you can combine the symbolism of the trine with the two sextiles. So these are all harmonious aspects. Pluto very loosely trining Uranus. This is a pretty loose thing. It shows some kind of cohesion or um, shared focus, especially in terms of like the world structure. These things, these are outer planets. These things are kind of far-reaching, so I'm not going to spend too much time delving into that. But what brings our focus to these things on this day, on Friday, is the moon. Moon is, of course, where we're at emotionally, basically, how we're experiencing things on a day-to-day level, especially emotionally. So Moon approaching and conjoining Neptune as it sextiles Pluto and Uranus. You basically have the Moon either conjoining or sextiling. In other words, you have the Moon making a major aspect with all of the outermost planets on the same day. Let's just put it that way. Let's simplify it that way. So most outermost planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, they're all forming a strong aspect with the Moon on the same day. As I always say, lunar aspects are super brief, but what this does, it channels in this consciousness, this energy that is normally, this outer planet consciousness is channeled into the moon. So in other words, outer planets have more to do with society or long-term trends, long-term periods. They are far-reaching concepts. Oftentimes their energies or concepts have to do with things that are like weird to us. They're obscure, they're abstract, they're far-reaching, things of those lines, of that nature. So that those types of energies are being brought into the our immediate awareness, our day-to-day awareness, which is represented by the moon. Does that make sense? So in other words, this may just be a very weird day. That's kind of what it translates to. Again, these are all harmonious aspects, so this may be positive in the sense that there may be something easy going on. There may be this element of harmony and cooperation. But again, outer planetary energies are generally very weird. We may feel like we're in kind of alien territory. Another part of this is we may be more aware of what's going on collectively. So something major could happen in the news, something major with countries, governments, the economy, whatever, world news in general. We may be more aware of these broader concepts, broader events, things of that nature. Yeah, so generally kind of a weird setup for a day, honestly. Saturday, August 5th. Again, no planetary aspects. I do think it's very strange for the next 2 weeks. We have very few planetary aspects. This is mostly just because Venus has slowed down since it's retrograde, and then all the inner planets, as I stated, are in Leo or Virgo. Sun, Venus, Mercury, Mars. So none of them. These are generally the fastest bodies other than the Moon. They're the ones that tend to make the most aspects, and right now they're just in a position where they're not making a lot of aspects. So as I mentioned before, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's less going on now, though. It can sometimes mean that. It doesn't always mean that. Okay. So for today, another day with no exact planetary aspects, but Moon did enter Aries around midnight of the night before, or like very early the morning of Saturday. So yeah, so depending on what you want to do and depending on your own astrology, this could be good. We basically have Moon in Aries for the whole weekend. So of course, bringing in that really active, pioneering, spontaneous energy. Aries, more than any other sign, represents initiation, and Moon is how we're feeling. So we're feeling oriented toward initiation, spontaneity. Let's do something. Let's start something. Let's get something going. We can be very expressive, very active, very spontaneous. And this is strengthened as well by the relationship the Moon has with the Sun. Sun is in Leo, Moon is in Aries now. These are both fire energies. They have a lot in common. Basically, how do I put this? Either one of these would already mean that we're in this phase that's very, active and focused on spontaneity, focused on beginnings and initiation, focused on being very expressive, playful, active, etc., etc. But because both the Sun and the Moon are in fire signs, this is strengthened even further. And today, on Saturday, August 5th, we will get an exact trine between the Moon and the Sun. So Moon making that trine to the sun means that it's a very harmonious, very strong, very easy dynamic or aspect to make. And because it's a fire trine, it just means that again, we're focused on these spontaneous, fun, fiery themes of the fire signs, basically. So of course, as always, depending on your own astrology, you may experience that in different ways. But collectively, I would say this is good mood energy. This is fun energy. Let's be lively. Let's maybe even kind of party energy to some extent. I think this would be a really great weekend for having a party, doing something fun, going out. Um, Actually, if I'm being completely honest, it's hard to imagine kind of a better setup for this because fire signs in general make us more spontaneous, more active, more adventurous. Let's be in the moment. Let's have fun. Let's be more expressive. But then also this trine, trine, I view a trine between the moon and the sun as, putting the common, everyone as a whole they have the best shot at being in a collective good mood when moon is trining the sun in general, if that makes sense. Some people will have their own experiences that may be very different, but collectively, this is good mood energy. This is about as good as it gets for having everyone in a good, positive mood. Okay, it's good vibes, generally speaking. Okay, and then this, of course, in many ways continues for Sunday because Moon will still be in Aries. It's not making that exact trine with the Sun anymore. But again, this is kind of still going on into Sunday as well. Moon is still in Aries, Sun is still, of course, in Leo. These energies are still very agreeable. There's still a lot of harmony. It's like strong. We're feeling strong right now. We're feeling like we've got this stable, strong energy with this loosening fire trine between the moon and the sun. Um, we do have one aspect for Sunday. So Sun will square Jupiter. Sun is at 13 degrees Leo. Actually, technically, this aspect happens at 14 degrees. So late in the day, Eastern Standard Time, Sun at 14 degrees Leo will square Jupiter at 14 degrees Taurus. And honestly, what would I have to say about this really? So we already talked about, we kind of talked about Jupiter a lot in this forecast, actually. We mentioned how Jupiter in Taurus has to do with expansion specifically with how we support ourselves, the economy, our relationship with money and resources, things of that nature. Expansion there. I feel like Jupiter in Taurus could also represent inflation in a way too, which may not necessarily be as positive. But now with Sun squaring Jupiter, this is another aspect that channels in those things into the day-to-day focus represented by the Sun. We may become more aware of changes, expansion to the economy, to things of that nature, societal issues having to do with resources, abundance, money, things, values, things of that nature. Um, so we can expect changes there, and also just becoming more aware of those changes being relevant or impacting our individual day-to-day experience, if that makes sense. Um, I think more generally, we can also just say this aspect between the Sun and Jupiter represents um, kind of a clash, but both of these being, such positive energies, being benefics, I think generally this is still favorable. There's some kind of expansion. There's some kind of opportunity for an adventure. It may be a choice that you have to make, an option, an opportunity, a choice. And one or both of those choices could involve some kind of expansion, some kind of, growth. Let's think about let's think about things in a way we haven't thought about them before, or, go somewhere we haven't gone before in some type of way. Again, specifically having to do with resources, maybe. That's what I'd have to say about that aspect. But most of what you're going to experience for Sunday is again that trine, that now dissipating trine between the moon and the sun. Moon in Aries, Sun in Leo. Fire, very fiery weekend, very outgoing. Party energy. Let's have fun. Let's do something. Let's be active. But also, fire signs are about individuality. So whatever you want to do, do you. Do what you want to do. It can be kind of universal to some extent. um, Doing you, honoring yourself, doing what you want to do in the moment, that is supported by these fire energies. So whatever you want to do this weekend, I say this is definitely a good weekend. Go out, do the event, do the thing, whatever it is. So that's what I have for you this week. I really wanted to keep this week forecast short, and it's almost an hour long now. So I apologize. I don't know if you guys have a preference between shorter or longer forecasts. As long as you're getting some kind of important information, I don't mind talking longer. I just do my best to stay concise, is the only thing. So yeah, very interesting week, very volatile, lots changing, lots continuing to change. And next week, there is a third quarter moon in Taurus. I know that may not sound as exciting as the full moon. I know everyone, talks about and focuses a lot more on the full moon than they do the quarter moons, but honestly, I do think full moons are a little bit overhyped. A little bit, yes, it's good that everyone is so aware of them though, and that typically astrological knowledge is more mainstream. That is awesome. But on the other hand, I do think people, could pay a little more attention to the quarter moons, specifically the first quarter moon, but third quarter moon as well. This represents a crisis in consciousness, represents sudden change, um, mostly just that, sudden changes, shifts. This one, I will admit, may not be as dramatic as the full moon, but it's still definitely very potent. This is one of the most tangible things I think you can see in astrology. So that will continue to shift things and change things as well next week. Okay, but that's what I have for you this week. I really hope this helps or was interesting or entertaining at the very least. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great week.